All right, thank you, everybody. So the audience poll is very close. We have 55% for the affirmation and 45% for the negation. The judges were also close. We have 3-2 in favor for the negative. All right, Jorge, do you want to go first?
Sure. I voted in favor of the affirmative in this case. I found both sides to be incredibly interesting. This was one of the best debates I've watched so far. Both sides were very close. I went back and forth several times. You all four of you did incredible speeches. I find the important points to have been the cross between education, the want for education, and the type of education to be a very important part. I also would like to note the point of on the affirmative side, that there is a high level of desire for education, and increasingly in today's society is very important to note. But also on the negation side, very, very good to point out is how the type of education that you're getting is a very important part to whether you're listening to a podcast. Just because it's a podcast or a documentary doesn't mean that it's particularly going to benefit you in a positive educational light. However, at the end, I had to side with the affirmative because it is about how we can have a change, a system, Ben's point that you can have a systemic change of the way that communication is brought about by scientists is a very, very important way of putting it. And because the debate was specifically how it can increase, not that it completely eliminates skepticism, but that it can make a change, I think that's what really turned me to the affirmative. So very good job on all sides.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Christian, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. It was a great debate. I also voted for the affirmative, and I also went back and forth a few times. I thought both arguments were sound in a lot of areas, and I found the most important part of each argument to be centered around the political aspect regarding, the dissemination of scientific information. And I think in Ben's speech, the second speech for the affirmative, he did an extremely good job of attacking the contentions of the negation speech to a point where it kind of swayed me just a little bit more in favor of the affirmative.
Great, thank you, Christian. Lorena?
So I voted for negation. I think that point that was made by, do I sound robotic? Yes, okay.
A little bit, yeah.
I'll try and come back. You go to the next page.
All right, Evan, do you want to go?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. Can everyone hear me and I don't sound like a robot? Awesome. Thank you to everyone who had the debate tonight. I went in reading the resolution and being like, well, duh, but it provided a lot more nuance than I expected, and I ended up voting for the negation. Everyone was a very strong speaker. It was a really great debate, but I just didn't buy the argument that communication by the scientific community included a revolution in education. Obviously, that's something that we absolutely need, but in my mind, that is not the job of the scientific community, but local leaders and politicians, because that's how our curriculum is formed. I also didn't buy the argument that increasing college degree numbers or podcast listeners indicated people were willing to change their fundamental beliefs and skepticism that they have deeply ingrained. That's the job of community leaders to communicate better, not the scientists who already have 1,000,001 things on their plate. But both sides provided a very strong argument, and I was really happy to judge this round.
Great, thank you, Evan. Lorena, are you back?
Yes, do I sound better or the same?
Better.
Okay, thank God. Okay, so I voted for the negation. I think that the point that Holly made in her speech was very important. That certain minority groups or communities of color, because of their experience with doctors, especially white doctors, they might be less trusting of the scientific community as a whole. But that's not to say that I didn't think the affirmation did a good job. They did a wonderful job. I sensed a lot of pathos in all of their arguments, which it was really good to see. I can tell that this is something that you all have become passionate about in your research, and overall it was very wonderful. So good job to everyone.
Thank you, Lorena. All right, Tobias, round us out.
Yeah, thank you for listening. For me, able to listen to the first debate, I enjoyed it a lot, and all speakers were really good. I did, however, voted for negation, and that came pretty much to 3 for me strong points. And one of them was by Holly, where she was both making the point in her argument, but also in the questioning that science skeptics are skeptic of scientists. So listening more to those scientists, I don't see how that makes you less skeptic. Like, more of a bad thing is not necessarily a good thing for a lot of people, at least if you have that point of view. So the second point is, I really like that Sophia was discrediting kind of the statistics. And that's one thing that came up for me as well. There was a lot of point about talking about the average, and the average is not really a good measure to describe the topic. For example, I think it was brought up that 16 books are read on average. That could just mean that 50% read 32 books and 50% read 0 books. So I think the average is really not a good measure, and that means that supposedly the skeptics, they read less books. That's not measured by the. And the third point is that really that one was a big to me, and I couldn't simply not imagine how the science communication would look like. I would have really liked to hear some form of specifics on how that looks like, because I simply cannot imagine how a professor can go to a community and talk to a blue-collar worker. I have no idea how that is supposed to look like. And I think that was really difficult for me, because I simply couldn't really imagine how the dynamics is supposed to work. I'm also a scientist myself, so I'm a little biased in that view. So that made it, I try to be neutral, but that I simply cannot see how that is supposed to go.
Thank you, Tobias. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Holly, our fearless captain.
Once again, thank you all for coming tonight. Let me stop this ridiculous recording.